Hi there. This video is going to be all about Soundtrap and the recording process and how to prepare for the editing process for your virtual choir in Logic Pro X. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is your backing tracks. Your backing track should be, if your song is accompanied, your backing track does need to be whatever the singers are going to perform with virtually. On top of that backing track, in the All Saints Atlanta production system, we have been adding some overlay tracks, which basically consist of a voiceover plus some piano playing on top of the organ backing track, and we then consolidate it down into one composite track in the background. And that just makes it a little bit easier to for the singers to line up, and then it makes it a little bit easier later on in this process to build our beat map. So the way that you do that, you can record all of that on Soundtrap. You load your backing track in just like this, and then send the link to the project. You just go to Share and copy the link from Share via Link and send it to whoever is coming in to do the overlay track. They will join the project, create their new tracks, record their stuff, and then once they're done, you just have to use this download mix, and that will download whatever you're hearing in the full audio right here. So after you do that, you just delete what's already in the project and re-import that composite track that will have the overlay track plus the backing track already on it. There will be another side video that demonstrates how to do this. So that's just a quick overview. But we are, for our purposes today, we are going to talk about this simple approach where it's just our performance backing track of the organ plus the singers that have come into this project and recorded on top. We can also expand this process into a separate project for each voice part, but this hymn is actually in unison, and these singers record most of their stuff, even though it's in parts, on one project because they're now used to the process. But again, that'll be in that same side video as creating composite backing tracks. So refer to that if you want to learn more about how that works. But this is more or less a foolproof process when you take that approach and bounce it out into a separate project for each voice part. I will say before we get started on this that you can also save time later if you build your beat map that we'll talk about a little bit later first, and then import the version of the backing track that you create using that beat map into Soundtrap, and that will just ensure that everything lines up from the get-go. Whereas you'll see later on in this tutorial process me demonstrating how to correct some of the or how to line things up, and it'll just save you a few clicks if you do that. Not necessary. We don't actually do that in this process. But it can be done to save a little bit of time if you're only doing a couple of these projects and you want to have as little headache as humanly possible. Okay, so before I talk about how the singers come into this project to record, a quick overview of Soundtrap. Soundtrap is a digital audio workstation. Think like Audacity, but it syncs to the cloud. So anybody that I send this link to can come into this project and record their audio on it. So when a singer comes in to record, ideally what will happen is all the previous singers will have muted their track after they record, so that the first singer or this next singer comes in and is only hearing the backing track, and then they can choose to unmute somebody of their voice part to sing along with them. But when they get in here, they just go add new track, select voice and microphones. It will ask them to allow microphone access initially. There's a sound check button that you can use to set your volume level. I recommend doing that the first time that you record. There's a reverb setting here that unfortunately cannot be turned off by default. Either the singer has to go in and manually turn it off, or I'll show you when I do the exports, but part of my process is just go in and turn off the reverb just in case they forgot to do that. And then they just plug in their wired headphones, click start recording, sing along, and when they're done, stop and click save up here at the top. and then their audio will appear just like these previous singers who have already come in to record. Now, the way that we've developed that's most efficient to get the singers into this project is actually via a Google Doc. And here's what this looks like. It comes, there will be a sample of these that you can just copy and paste from that'll have the same links to these instructional videos in here. But there's some instructions, links to the apps if they're using a smartphone, and a demonstration video that overviews how to use Soundtrap for the singers. And then there's another one that shows just how to do a sound check, because that's a frequent troubleshooting tool that we have to use. We have some text-based instructions, and then finally we just include the links. We just put the due date here, sort it by month that it's actually the scheduled Sunday that it's premiering, and then the link. They click this link, it'll take them directly to this project, and they record just like I demonstrated earlier. There's a couple buttons that singers do need to be aware of as well, mainly the mute button and the solo button. The mute button clearly just mutes the track that you don't want to hear, and the solo button makes it to where you only hear the track that you do want to hear. So you can use either combination of these two buttons to make sure that you're hearing the ideal combination of tracks whenever you're recording. Usually, though, best practice is after a singer comes in to record, if they mute their own track, then when everybody comes in, it'll just be that backing track. They can unmute whoever they want to record with, mute everything when they're done, and save it. So that's our brief overview of Soundtrap. You can watch that instructional video on here that has a little more detail on exactly what the singer process is like. But we have some common troubleshooting things that I do want to talk about as well. Number one, they need to use Google Chrome. There are known issues with Safari. Safari is mainly like zooming doesn't work the same way. It just doesn't work, period, on Safari sometimes. Also, if singers are having difficulty in getting their mic to work, if they clear their cookies and their cache and restart their device, usually 9 times out of 10 that fixes it. You can also run into issues where if a singer plugs in headphones, that have a microphone on the cord, they may need to go in here and change their input selection. Normal computers don't have all of these different things on here, but default would be set to internal microphone. Obviously, I'm screen recording right now, so I have to have it set to something else. But internal microphone is what you would want it set to for the singers. Even if they have a microphone on their headphone cord, the internal microphone is still going to be better because it's not right up next to their mouth. Also, it can't brush against clothing or anything like that. And sometimes the microphones on headphones are optimized for dialogue, not for singing or other music. So better to use the device's built-in microphone that's more universal, or a separate USB microphone, which you would select from this drop-down as well. Lastly, timing issues. So if a singer has recorded and they're having timing issues, like they're not lining up with everybody else, usually the cause of that is that they're using Bluetooth headphones. And there's a quick and easy way to fix this. But also, there sometimes are some singers whose devices just are not as fast, or they're experiencing some sort of slow internet connection, and their audio is a little bit delayed behind everybody else's. And I know right off the top of my head, just from working with this group often, that Frank, who's a fantastic tenor, has a device that doesn't like to operate at the same speed as everybody else's sometimes. So Frank is probably a little bit behind everybody else. So if I solo Frank's track and Caroline's track, because she's usually right on the money, I can kind of show you, and we'll see if this is the case. So you can hear Frank's just a little bit behind, as usual. That's not how he normally sings. That's just what's happening with his device. So to fix this, I'm going to trim a little bit off the front end. Just a little bit. It doesn't need to be a lot. I'm just clicking on the leftmost edge of his track and dragging to the right. And then I'm just going to nudge his track to the left very slightly. You may not even have seen that. It's almost imperceptible, but that's almost all that it needs usually.
Sing praise to God who reigns above.
Yep, and then I like to, just for consistency's sake, click, drag it back to the left so that it starts exactly at the beginning, and I know that they have recorded silence at the beginning so I can hear their room sound, which will be important for later. Now let me just unsolo these tracks, and I'm going to click save, which is going to sync this to anybody else who has the link, so that they'll come into this version where Frank is properly aligned. Now, next, how do we get the audio off of here onto Soundtrap, or not Soundtrap, excuse me, Logic Pro for editing? I like to, so I already have my backing track downloaded on my device. I'm not even going to worry about exporting it from here because I don't need to do that again. But I like to set all the singers to basically the exact same volume level, and I just eyeball that at roughly 50%, so straight up for their line right here. And I just go through and I set every singer to that, to where the little purple line is vertical. And I'll do this first, usually. And the reason I do this is exactly why, is because of singers, like, for example, Greer's track right here. She has recorded and probably didn't run a sound check first, which is not the end of the world because her audio's not peaking too bad, maybe a teeny bit there. But if you pull the audio down a little bit before you export it, you're not running the risk of it peaking and sounding distorted when you pull it off of Soundtrap, and having to come back and redo that later. So I pull them out of Soundtrap at a lower volume than they recorded for exactly that reason. Next step, I open up each singer's track, and actually this goes a little bit faster if you start from the bottom. Not saving a ton of time, but just a little bit of time, a few extra clicks. I turn off the reverb, click and drag straight down. A lot of people have issues with this because they try and turn it like a knob, and if you do that, it'll just wiggle back and forth like this and not go anywhere. So you have to click and drag straight down, and if you do that, it'll turn the reverb off. Also, a couple singers sometimes will accidentally have their pan set all the way to left. Then they'll only be coming out the left speaker or the left earbud if that's the case. So I correct that if they've done that. But let me just undo and set it back to center, perfectly centered. Next step, after I turn off the reverb for everybody, there we go. She has panned herself all the way to the left on accident. There we go. Back to center for you. Turning off the reverb on everybody else. I missed one here. And I like to just open it up, click and drag straight down anyway, just in case there's a little bit of reverb on there. And the reason for this is I want the reverb to be consistent across every single person's track, and I'm going to apply that reverb toward the very end of the editing process. It will be cleaner when you're editing on Melodyne if you have no reverb on the initial track. And that the same goes for the space that they record in. It's preferable to have them record in a dry space rather than a wet space. Last step before I export, I put the letter of their voice part at the front of their track. And I do this just by double-clicking on the title of their track, and then I hit the up arrow on my keyboard, and I go A space dash space. And I do that for each singer. And this keeps it organized so that when I pull it into the project, it's going to be in the order that I want, or not exactly the order that I want, but it'll be sorted alphabetically, so that I don't have to hunt for whose voice or whose recording is where. And it's all ready to go and organized and very clean. So I'll just go through here, retitle all of these to put their voice parts. I just know these by heart now that I've worked with them so much, but initially I would have to listen and figure it out based off if there were parts at any point. I'd just listen and figure out, okay, are they singing the soprano part, the alto part, tenor part, or the bass part? Okay, now we are finally ready to pull everything off Soundtrap. Click these three dots right here on the first singer's track and select export this track. It'll say mixing, and then it'll, I think it says encoding next. Yep, and then it will open up the option to download. Now, like a great cooking show, I have already done this, so you don't have to sit here and watch me do this. I have everybody's track already exported in a folder. And the way that I do this, I just put it in its own folder called Soundtrap Exports, and I keep it separate from the backing track. And that just ensures if something goes wrong later on in the process, I can come back to this step and I still have everybody's audio off of Soundtrap ready to go, and I don't have to go back in and redo any of this stuff. So that's the way that I do that. So we are now reaching the end of this video. One last thing before I end this segment of the editing process. The file organization system that we have going on, I think, is really great. It works very well. Kirk has set up a virtual choir emporium where he uploads all of his tracks to. And then once he does that, I can access that because that shared Google Drive folder that Google Drive folder has been shared with me. I'll open up the emporium so you can see this real quick. So he has all sorts of stuff on here, from graphics to solos to production schedules to recordings and instructions and all that. Within the recordings folder, he's also created a 2021 projects. If you're in a shared with me folder on Google Drive, though, you can actually add this folder to your drive by hitting Shift Z, and then you can add it anywhere on your drive, and it will be there as its own folder rather than as a shortcut. And then if you have backup and sync for Google Drive installed, it will automatically sync any changes to that folder to your hard drive. So I don't actually have to go in and download any of this stuff. It automatically downloads to my hard drive, and I don't sit there trying to sift through a bunch of files. It's already on my computer. So this is a hymn for January. It's on January 24th, and the title is Sing Praise to God Who Reigns Above. Here is my backing track and the score that Kirk has already loaded in for me, and then my Soundtrap exports go here. That way, all of this at the very end of the editing process is in one folder package because these files take up a huge amount of space on a hard drive, I just drag it over to my external hard drive and then delete it off my computer, and that way I'm only dragging one folder over at a time, and actually I do it by month, so I'll drag all of January off over here, copy it to my external hard drive, and then I'll move January to the completed 2021 projects. It'll take it off my hard drive automatically when I do that, so it'll take up less space on my hard drive, but it's still properly synced to the cloud, and Kirk can access those files whenever he needs to. So that is the end of this first segment of the video. Next up, we will talk about building beat maps in the Melodyne standalone program. Thanks for watching.